And you are live.
Thank you. Good morning. This is the regular audit committee meeting of February 20th. We have a quorum in that we have Alderwoman Kendall Charles, Ms. Baker, and Mr. Cardillo, and myself. Missing our Alderwoman Tierney, and that's it. So I think we've done the roll call. May I have a motion to approve the minutes as were sent to us by Kim?
Mr. Chair, can we approve the agenda?
I'm sorry, I meant to say agenda. Yes, let's approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The agenda is approved. Now we can go to the minutes. Is there a motion to approve or amend the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of any discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, the minutes are approved. All right. I think the next item on the agenda, an old business, is pretty glaring given the paucity of people here at the meeting, but I know that Hillary has it on her agenda to scrounge for people that could be on the committee. I'm keeping my eye on the Financial Advisory Commission because it seems to be dwindling in its meetings, and there is another auditor on that committee. So if that committee should cease operations or say be combined with another committee, it's been suggested they be combined with us. That would bring an actual, aside from Jim, auditor onto this committee. But it's in my conversations, which I admit are rare with people, audit committee is not exactly a draw, not exactly an attraction. So uh, any other comments on vacancies?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I've tried to connect with you and Hillary a couple times to help get this process rolling, and unfortunately, I'm not getting much in the way of response. So if
No,
there's
you're
if there's
right.
something I can do.
Well, I guess that is a question, Jim. You are in this community. You know other auditors. In fact, I think there's a vacancy on the Financial Advisory Commission and here, and having an auditor on both of those could give you some relief. But I don't know. I mean, where do you seek people to be on the audit committee?
Yeah, I guess that there are potential colleagues that I could contact. I have discussed it with some colleagues. Most are feeling volunteer fatigue.
Mhm.
So I sympathize with that. I had kind of a unique proposal to Ms. Raftovich about contacting people through LinkedIn who may be residents of the area with an accounting or an auditing background. So
Well, I don't know what LinkedIn is, to be honest with you. What does that mean?
briefly, LinkedIn is a a business networking site.
Okay.
So I'm looking to identify people who may be in the Annapolis area within the city or its environs and have backgrounds and would be interested in talking to somebody about um, uh, joining this committee and serving their community. So that's how I was going about it.
Okay. And have you done that?
Well, I've been trying to work with Hillary, and unfortunately, she said she needed your permission, and I said to you, I said, what do we
I
have to
will, I
do? And
will, I will send her a text during this meeting to let her know that she and I have talked. Because whenever we have members for other committees, Hillary comes, like when
Mhm.
Rules is reviewing, and we have talked about the audit committee. and she professes that it's a tough one. But I'll talk to her today. And, any port in the storm, I think getting people who know what they're doing on this committee, I think is obviously desirable. I don't count myself among those people who are in the initiate auditing world, but we do rely on you a lot, Jim. But I know you're burdened by both this and the Financial Advisory Commission. So
Thank you.
I will get to Hillary immediately. I didn't realize because she didn't communicate to me that I was the roadblock, but I've been the roadblock in many other things, so why should this be different? I will do that immediately.
I'm not
Yes.
sure it's so much a roadblock. It's just that the audit committee is one of the committees that doesn't go through that normal channel of the mayor nominating and stuff like that. That's one that I believe council nominates directly. And so I think Hillary's role in that is maybe a little more circumspect than it normally is.
Yeah, and
Thank
I
you,
think
Vicky.
that's really always been something, and actually Jared Littman and I were the ones that authorized the legislation, mainly at Jared's impetus. And I think we've always both had a very different view of what the audit committee could do, but it is a strange beast. There is no other like us. It's not even the Financial Advisory Commission because it doesn't have alderpersons on it, although I always try to get to the meetings. So it's an odd duck. It's neither fish nor fowl, and it is hard to figure out exactly what to do with it. And it was created to be that way, but it makes it sort of an orphan in the process. Okay, so action item on this is I will talk to Hillary today if we can get together and tell her not only please not let me be the roadblock, but also let me know anything that she can think of that we can do. Is there a National Auditors Committee conference that we can go to and troll for members?
Well,
All
I also mentioned to Hillary that she could use this tool to facilitate interest in other boards and commissions. So it's
Right.
not just for the financial community.
Okay.
So.
So let me make a note to myself. All right. Consider it done.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Next item on the agenda is the Audit of Arts in Public Places Commission. And I sent you, actually Kim sent you, I sent to Kim the information from the city code that governs how the Arts in Public Places makes their commissions. I don't know if you've watched any of their recent meetings, but that body, the Arts in Public Places, I would call them zesty. But at their last meeting, they felt they didn't have enough money to make an award for the next sculpture in Westmoreland Circle, which I found interesting because they have that 3% tap on the hotel tax. And I thought they had well over $100,000. I'm not sure what kind of sculpture we're going to be putting there. They do obviously have, if you read in the code and their procedures, they have a lot of other things they do besides just statuary and circles. They do a lot of entertainment at City Dock. With if we ever do break ground there, I'm not sure how much entertaining they're going to be occupied doing at City Dock. But in any event, I did read the code and I did have some conversation, and I think that the finance director, Ms. Dickinson, indicated to us at the last meeting, but in my conversations with a couple of people on the audit committee, they feel very much the strong, positive but strong oversight from the finance department on any expenditure they make. And they did have and followed, from my observation at least, a very rigorous process, and it was an open process for the statuary at Westmoreland. So that's pretty much all the information I've been able to glean. Has anyone else had a chance to look at this, or do you have some thoughts on this particular issue as it presents itself to the audit committee?
I did review it. There seems to be, a great process in place. And I guess for me, the question would be, are these processes followed?
Yeah.
That's
And
my really only question. I mean, I can't evaluate their work. I'm just saying that they have some very detailed processes in place. Do they follow the processes?
I will answer that by my observation of their meetings, their televised meetings. I looked at the last three. They follow it with some zeal and some acrimony. And so I think their process is very public.
Okay.
They solicit. They had quite a
So-
number of applications for the last bit of statuary. I think it was at least 26. They narrowed it to 3 in a public session. And then there was public reaction to their 3 choices. So they've withdrawn that. They're at their last meeting, they had a motion to reconsider the 3 candidates at their next meeting, which would be their meeting in March, which I assume they're going to do, but there was some input from some committee members that they thought that might be rushing it a little bit, which I thought showed good stewardship, not wanting to rush it, because it would be the public that would be rushed if they rushed to some judgment, either to move forward with one of the candidates or to reopen the process, which I think is their inclination. But for me, it's watching their meetings, it's as open a process as I can imagine. Now, there might be some people going around behind the scenes soliciting submissions from various artists. Frankly, I think that's kind of a good thing. And
Oh,
as
yeah.
long as they're submitted in an open process. So from my perspective, I think they're well managed by the finance department in terms of any actual procurement, and that their processes are published and well known, and I believe followed.
Mr. Chair, Rosalind, does the director rec and parks know she's responsible for the inventory of art in public places?
Yes,
She's aware of that?
yes, she is. And well, I have to say, as an aside, she is a dynamo. I was, she presented or presided over the purchase of the Morehouse at Tony, how do you pronounce it, Rhonda? Etonia Park, Beach?
Eltonia. Mhm.
Eltonia
Eltonia
Beach.
Beach?
Yeah,
Yeah.
which was featured in the Capitol, and she did a marvelous job. But she has come in, and I think um, taken charge and has a full grasp of all the different things. And that department has a lot of different things that they're responsible for, because it's parks as well as rec. And there's a lot of interaction that goes on at the county and even the state level. And I have to, again, gratuitously say, I think the mayor has chosen some pretty good department heads. I'm pleased to work for a city, with a city that has department heads of the strength that we have. So yes, she is aware. And I think that to the extent that there's maintenance required that is not contractual maintenance, that's something that falls to parks. There is a whole inventory of various things throughout the city, which are becoming quite numerous. So yes, in answer to your question, longer as usual than necessary.
I appreciate the discourse. No, I was interested to know if Rec and Parks is aware that they are responsible for the inventory and maintenance of art in public places. So it's kind of unique.
Yeah, and I think they do it with a certain amount of zeal under this leadership. So I see, personally, I see no problems there.
Great. Well, thank you for that. That was interesting. Thank you for soliciting the information.
Right. From my perspective, I see nothing here that has any cause for this body to pursue this further. I think there are well-established and followed processes. There's a very strong oversight from the finance department. No monies can be expended without the director authorizing that expenditure. And I think we all know Ms. Dickinson well enough to know that she really does pay attention to the details. So I feel personally quite comfortable that there's nothing in from an audit perspective untoward here. They do have controversy, just like all of our bodies manage to generate, except the audit committee. We are so uncontroversial. So I would actually consider, and I don't know if we have to make a formal motion, then we can do that if we want, this issue closed. Anne-Marie?
Well, I was going to say, so I think this all stemmed from a request from like a resident, right? That came to Alderwoman Tierney asking for an audit of the spending.
Yeah, I think
and so I
that,
don't know how that gets addressed, or if it's just that when someone submits a request or a complaint, it kind of goes unresponded to and we deal with it as it is, or if it requires she will respond to them. I guess that's the only thing I see is
right.
left open.
And she just texted me a few minutes ago and is not going to be here today. I will, I mean, we can leave this open, keep it on the agenda, and I can have a conversation with Alderwoman Tierney and let her know the discourse we've had this morning and see. I'm not sure who it is that spoke to her. I have my suspicions, and as you might have guessed by some of the comments I've made, there is turmoil on this body right now. And unfortunately, people resigning their positions and people who've been a long tenure. So this has caused some acrimony, but I don't think it's caused anything that to my mind is a audit issue. But we can leave this open. I will have a conversation with Alderwoman Tierney. I don't know when we're seeing each other next in committee, but I will have that conversation. So I will call Ellie.
Thank you. I agree that it's not something we need to pursue further from our end here, but I just want to make sure it was fully closed out.
Yep, I appreciate that diligence, and we will keep it on the agenda, and I will report back, or Alderwoman Tierney can report for herself at the next meeting. But that we'll leave that on the agenda. Now this next one, I am very interested to hear about performance measures and strategic plans, and we have Ms. Buckland with us, so you're on.
Yeah, so we are continuing apace. Obviously, we're in the middle of going through budget submissions, and at this point, really making sure that we've met with each department. We understand what all is there. We know what's been included, what hasn't been included in that initial submission. The performance measures, in my mind, shed some amount of light on that, but particularly shed light during the decision-making process to help decide what kinds of things are top of list and what things are potentially lower down on the list. Obviously, we had the National Community Survey come out not too long ago, which also then helps us between departments help to shed some light on where the priorities are of the residents. So between those two things, plus the priorities set when council and the department directors met separately, those things then will help some shed light on the prioritizing process. There's some amount of, what's our base level? But most of the use, I think, is really in that prioritizing. Where do we have the next dollars go? So that actually is ahead of us. And we're actually not quite going through just the baseline stuff. We've got the last meetings this week. So there is some follow-up that I need to do in terms of gathering some information. But for the most part, I think we're ready to have some of those conversations. So
from my perspective, we have been ready for 200 years in the city to have those conversations. A bit of unsolicited biography. I first was exposed to performance measures by President Carter, followed by President Reagan, and virtually every president who would come in and would want to clean up the inefficiencies of bureaucracy. And the first thing they would want to do is to have a prioritized set of performance measures where we had to rank order each of the major products that our component produced. And I always commiserated. I was in charge of private health insurance for the National Health Accounts, and my colleague who came over from the Bureau of Economics was in charge of state health insurance estimates. And we were always ranked 9 and 10, and I was 10. So it did not make us feel comfortable about if there were some kind of cut where we were going to be in that scheme of thing. Unlike my colleague, I had veterans preference, so I wasn't too worried about losing a job, but I might not be working in the same place. I think that we are not managing. I think our current performance measures are virtually devoid of measures at all. And only 2 departments, I think, could come close to any serious scrutiny. And I've been saying that for a long time, so there's no secret. But my regroup was, well, okay, let's get an umbrella, a strategic plan, and let that guide the performance measures and let that guide the priority. I have to say that while there was merit in our joint meeting with the department heads and the city council, the merit was largely, for me, showing the flaws in the 7 strategic areas that we selected as the city council as our strategic issues, 3 of which were what is the word? Attainment of goals, objectives, visions, and 4 of which were actually actionable to translate into actionable performance measures. And I know that we did not get very far in the exercise for the day, so most of the work was done. Just for those who weren't there, the council was asked to pick the top 3 or so action items that we could do to implement the 7 strategic goals. And none of the 7 categories had less than 21 action items. And we did do an exercise to sort of prioritize them, and that's a painful thing that I think we have to go through, but we did not get, in my view, very far towards either a strategic set of goals or actionable things that could translate into performance measures. And I'm very anxious that this clock has been running for a while, and this term has less than 2 years left. And I will be quite honest that one of the legacies that I would be very proud to leave as part of my years on the council would be that we had a strategic plan linked to performance measures that had measures, and that those performance measures would make up the performance appraisals of all of the employees in each of the components. And I think we would have then very good vertical and horizontal integration, and we would have accountability. The group that I think has the least accountability is the city council. We don't have any performance measures. We don't have any link. We do not have a mission and vision statement for the city. And I just really wonder how we can continue to muddle through. Clearly, we've been doing it for quite a few centuries now, but muddle through, I think, was probably the best we can say about it. So I know this was me up on my soapbox, but I'm very, very concerned that we're not making the progress we need. And here we are now in the midst of the next budget, this huge 1,000+ pages of comprehensive plan that is now on the table for the city council. I just don't know when we're going to get back to this exercise of coming up with a strategic plan and then having it guide the performance measures. I don't even know, do we still have a contractor to help us with either of those two tests, Vicki?
We do still have access to the folks that helped us. There's an internal, someone we've used internally for some leadership development in particular, who I think we have time left with. And I see the woman Pendle Charles' hand up.
Yes, I'm going to get that in 1 second, but I am so long-winded. But I really am very concerned, and I don't know what I need to do. Maybe it is an email from me to the city manager. Maybe it's a position that this body takes up. But I do want to leave this on the agenda because I'm just not going to quit until my term runs out. I'm not quitting on this topic. I think it's very important to good management. I look at other municipalities, and I actually have researched through MML. There are some exemplary municipalities in the state that have very good strategic plans and very good performance measures. Some of them very, very tiny municipalities, but I feel kind of embarrassed that they're much better organized in this regard than we are. So I'm making a very direct pitch that we not let this fall by the wayside. We really have got to keep this rolling. Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me preface this by saying when we look at the council, we all come from different professional disciplines. And I've never been in a discipline, at least my professional career as a prosecutor, a performance measure was pretty much one, which is clearance rate. Get the docket done. And so I'm not used to that, but I will say in many professions, I think, at least when it comes to public safety and law enforcement, there are, I guess, performance measures, if you want to call them that, but they're generally based on what's going on externally. If you've got a high crime rate, then that's getting that done is the performance measure. I don't know how you couch it in words, but it wasn't necessarily a long process. I mean, I'm listening to you, Mr. Chair, and it definitely was a strategic and surgical way of approaching your job. I'm not used to that. And so I think we all, and I've said it 1,000 times, when we come to looking at any kind of issue, we fall back on how we were trained or our professional backgrounds. And that's kind of what our lens is. And so my lens isn't, I'm not saying we don't need them, but that's like speaking, French to me. I get it and I understand the necessity, but I do understand, I guess, in city government, it's dependent oftentimes on, okay, we've got flooding downtown. We're all going to rush to try to figure out how do we mitigate all of that and all the resiliency measures we have to do. Once that's kind of done, then we run to the next big thing, which could be public safety, depending on what it is. So oftentimes performance measures are based on the hot item, for lack of a better term, at the moment. And so I think that could be some of the problems we're having with kind of getting to where we're supposed to go. It may be the trying to get a square peg in a round hole kind of situation. You have a great grasp on that. You've done it for years. That's your professional acumen. That's not mine. So for me to get there may take a bit more, but I'm still rolling back to my own training. And my own training says, get those cases done, get the clearance rate done, and move on to the next situation. That's how I kind of see it. That might be, I'm always asking why. That might be the why in all of this, that we all see it from a different professional lens.
I'm going to build on that for just a second. So in my experience, I actually don't like using the term prioritizing. I did use it here. I tend to try not to use that when I'm having a conversation with a department, because usually what happens is that the assumption that's made is that anything else isn't important, and people they justifiably react to that. And so I tend to talk more about what do we want to do first, because that implies that there's a second and a third, right? And people are more likely to answer, what do you want to do first, than to answer the question, what's the priority? Particularly in the public safety realm, to build on what Alderwoman Pindle Charles said, that's an area where you can definitely have a lot of very perverse incentives. Clearance rates being a good example, where it's a very natural thing to measure. But there are lots of ways to close a case, and not all of them are good ways to close a case. And so it's a play. I tend to tread a little bit lightly, just because my goal is progress, not necessarily perfection. So let's get better than we were in a way that doesn't, hopefully, or minimizes the perverse incentives, gives us some more information about what we want to do first. And so, and that may be a place where just my background and yours don't fit perfectly together. I may not go as fast as you would really wish that I did. And for that, I will apologize up front. But what I do want to have is something that'll stick, that we won't go back and undo later.
Thank you, Jim and Anne-Marie. I certainly would welcome your input. I do have some responses, but I don't want to monopolize all the airtime.
Thanks. My only comment or to add to all the discussions going on is, what I believe is that by adding performance measures into the annual process for department heads, it's going to create the opportunity for them to look beyond the current budget year. And I think that we tend to focus on, well, let's get this budget approved and we'll kick the can down the road on, the next budget issue. But I would hope that department heads and leadership would develop these performance measures with an eye toward a 2 to 3 to 4 year progress on achieving these goals. So that's my addition to the discussion.
I will recognize you in a minute, Rhonda, but Anne Marie, did you have any observations?
I don't have anything further.
All right. So let me respond to a couple things before I get to you, Rhonda. We are a government entity, so we don't have a bottom line that is the thing that really tells you whether you're performing or not. And we don't have activist managers trying to take us over. So the French long ago developed something that I think is a very positive thing called bureaucracy. And it was a way to manage government entities that had no bottom line and could very easily get lost with their nose to the grindstone and doing the daily thing, clearing the docket, making the arrest, and lose sight of the big picture. And that is the primary reason for having mission and vision statements, which we do not have, and strategic plan, which gets to Jim's point of here we are now, where do we want to be 10 years from now? And some ideas of what the ways to get there are, and then link that to performance measures. And I mean real measures, not what we're getting in the stuff that was developed. Look, I was an excellent bureaucrat. I really knew how to beat the system. When you looked at my performance measures and all the way I did my employees' performance appraisals, we were gold star. And so there was no Jimmy Carter or Ronald Reagan or anyone else who was going to come in and unseat my mission. And I started as a branch chief and ended up as a center director in an agency like NIH. So I knew how to play the game. And in fact, the personnel people, when they would see me coming, oh no, what does Arnett want to do now? But it really, really had a positive benefit for my staff, which was they knew what was expected of them, and they knew what the mission was, and they knew what the big picture was and what we were doing. And I was really fortunate to be in a place that was very strategic in setting national health policy, leveraging trillions of dollars. And it was very important that we knew what our game was. I think it is very important that the police department know what its priorities are in the public works. Now, I just earlier touted the fact that I think we have some excellent senior managers. And one of the reasons why they're excellent is, in spite of lack of a roadmap, I think they do a pretty darn good job. But I think we can do better. And I think we also are handicapped because we have a very strange form of government. We have at least a three-headed monster because we have the mayor, who is also the chief executive officer, and then we have the city manager, who ostensibly is the day-to-day manager, and then we have a city attorney who makes an awful lot of policy decisions. And one of the reasons why I want us to have a strategic plan is I think that monster, that three-headed monster, does need some sorting out. I do think we can do better. And I do think that when we do that, morale will improve, just as I feel it did with the bureaucracies that I was able to establish. So you're right, I'm passionate about this, and I do have an experience, but government is different than private sector. In private sector, when you don't bring in enough money to pay your employees or buy your materials for producing, you're not performing well. Here, we have an electorate who are really our bosses that have no clue what we do. They know that they pay too much taxes, even though I think we're very lightly taxed. And they know when there's gunfire that we haven't done a good job on public safety, or some other snafu when there's a kerfuffle about artwork in the circle. They're not sure we're up to snuff. But this is a form of rigor which I would like to see established and enduring, that would really, I think, make it easier for all of us to do our job. And as far as the prioritizing, I confess to you, I didn't like being number 10 on the list. So I understand there is that negative aspect to it, but there was a time back in 2008, 2009, when we really did have to make some cuts. We were facing bankruptcy. And I think we did a terrible job there. We cut 33 people, only 12 actually ended up losing their jobs, and we really needed to cut 60, and we had no tool. It was just like throwing darts. And so, I'm one of the things that I've said I would really like to do is to leave a better roadmap so everybody understands how they fit in. Everyone can look at, I did this when I was working at the Bureau of Economic Analysis on gross domestic product, and Dan Rather would announce the newest numbers. I knew exactly where my part in that was, and I felt very good about it. I felt productive. So anyway, I'm sorry for that rant, but Rhonda.
I'm gonna get a little personal, like our chairman did, and to kind of give you a good example of how I got to this. As many of you know, I was a prosecutor. I retired in Baltimore City after 20 and a half years. Then after I retired, I went to the health department, the county health department, for a year as a program manager for the Office of Minority Health. And then I went to the school system for 16 years, and I retired from there. And I'll be honest, and I even mentioned this publicly to Dr. Bedell, the prosecuting law part went extremely well. The health department and the school system, I'll put it mildly, I lasted, but it was a disaster. And I'll tell you why. I was glad I did it. I learned a lot. I made a lot of great friends. I did a lot of great work, but it wasn't a fit. And I'll tell you why it wasn't a fit. And I had to think long and hard about this. My husband told me I needed to do some self-reflection. And I said, I don't need to, but then I realized I did. And so when I looked at the three disciplines, when I looked at health, health is an exacting science. If the doctor tells you to take 5 milligrams and you take 6, it could kill you. And so writing a letter in the health department, and I'm glad the chair brought up bureaucracy. If I wrote a 5-sentence letter, 3 people had to authorize it to go out. It was like I was like a bull in a china closet. Then when I went to the school system is structured. Pretty much, you have to get through a certain curriculum. Day by day, they tell you what you teach, and at the end. And so it's very structured. Law is all over the place. And they told us when we started law school that we will turn your head upside down all around. You'll be able to argue 1 point at 1 minute and 1 point at another. And what I learned was those other 2 disciplines, health and education, did not lend itself to a lawyer. It did not. And I'll give you an example. When I was with the school system, I was asked to promote a program called Senior Senior. I had to find senior high school students to read to kids, second graders, every Tuesday. And I had to find older people, seniors, to do the same thing. I went to meet high school, checked the box, got the Honor Society on board, and they did their job. Then I had to find some seniors. I looked everywhere, high and low, high and low. I found 2 people. They lasted all about 3 months. One got sick and the other one's husband got sick. And I could not find any older folk to do this every Tuesday, read to second graders. So my law lens says, okay, prosecutor, go over to the Western District Police Station in Odenton. I go talk to the commander. Can you send some officers over? Sure, because if Officer Jones doesn't show up on Tuesday, Officer Smith will come. Got it. Go to the school system for training. I come in with all these very young police officers to do the job, and they look at me like I have 5 heads. It's like, you're supposed to find old people, not young police officers. I said, that's my only lens I know. My thing is, we're supposed to get this job done, and if it takes officers versus older people. My daughter, who's a physical therapist, said, well, Mom, you could have gone over to the hospital. We do a lot of that. Wasn't my brain, because I'm not the health brain. So what I'm saying is, when you come into a situation like the council, we all come in with different lenses, like I said before. And for some, it's difficult to fit into that bureaucracy, even though I was with with a government agency, but it did not lend itself to bureaucracy at all. You could not survive if you did. You had to think outside the box. You had to come up with something if the judge threw something at you that you weren't familiar with, but you had to come up with an answer. And so when you have that brain, and that's how you're trained, and I told Dr. Olato, the previous superintendent, I said, I could be in the school system 50 years, but I'll never be an educator, never, because I wasn't trained that way, and that's not where my brain was. So I think that's part of the reason when you try to get these different disciplines, whether it's a civil engineer in public works, whether it's a police chief in the police department, you're talking about people with totally different lens on how to approach a problem. And not saying that performance measures aren't important, but even the verbiage you use, like Ms. Buckland indicated, assistant city manager, priorities versus what are you going to do first, it translates into something else for somebody else. And so it's hard. It's hard to do. And I know our chairman grew up under the bureaucracy system, and that's his lens. It's not mine, but I'll go down the road with him as best I can. But it's a hard sell for me. Not a hard sell, but a hard do. So that's kind of on a personal note where I'm at.
All right. Well, now that we've told both of our life histories, maybe we should get back to the agenda. The next item on the agenda is risk assessment. I don't think we've had anything on the hotline, so I don't know that there's anything to bring up under that particular topic, unless somebody has something. Under new business, we have the election of officers. Once again, we talked about how this is a strange breed, but I want to nominate Ellie Tierney as chair of the audit committee. I think our this actually came up in a previous iteration before I was chair, and it is that the mayor does appoint the chair of the audit committee, and that's it. But the process for this is we would accept nominees for chair of the audit committee. Is there a nominee for chair?
I have a question. Because on the council, we're each chair of one committee, I'm assuming that our chair is tongue-in-cheek when it comes to Alderwoman Tierney, because she already chairs finance.
She's not here.
Yeah,
so
I know.
I was trying
that
to
too.
abuse her in absentia.
So I would nominate Alderman Arnett. With that being said.
Thank you. Are there any other candidates, Anne Marie? Actually, the code says that it has to be an elected official, so it would be the choice of Alderman Tierney, Alderman Pendle-Giles, or Alderman Arnett. So is there a motion? Anne Marie, you were going to say something?
Oh, no, yeah, it looks like,
hearing no other nominee, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was gonna say, it looks like Jim might have had to drop off, or Mr. Cardell.
I think he got tired of 2 alderpersons flapping their jaw and said, I'm not going to take this abuse anymore. Yeah, so we don't have a quorum.
So I don't know, can we proceed with this?
No.
Okay.
So unless Jim comes back, fortunately, we don't have the finance director. Our annual report was filed. Thank you, Kim. And our next meeting will be March 18th. We can't even take a motion to adjourn because we don't have a quorum. So the meeting is actually timely. It's almost 9 o'clock. The meeting is over. It's not even adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Vicky?
guys.
Thank you.
Thank